Oh, okay. I'm looking for Sheen. Ooh, Sheen. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
You're good.
Feeling happy as always. Terrific.
Oh, nice.
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah.
Good to hear that.
So what did you prepare?
Just a moment.
Okay.
Just a moment. Let me take a picture of you because I see some very cute stickers on your phone.
Yeah. So
Can I show our audience the stickers that they can't see?
yes. Okay.
The
Can you guys
camera,
see it?
live microphone.
Yep.
Remember
And
last time we had the surprise. You had the surprise for
yes,
me.
and we have more.
You have more.
So
What are
so
these?
what did you prepare for our audience this week?
Okay.
Yes.
So last time we prepared some surprises, and there were people who were saying, "Luxin, you're just showing us. You're not sharing these gifts with us." So I guess I have to share some of the gifts with you. So look at this. This is Headline Buster special pins. You see
Yes.
how beautiful that is?
Last year we made this gift
Yeah,
for our
Headline
crew.
Buster.
Yes.
You know, you can wear it like that. You can wear it on your cap, or you can give it as a gift. It's special Headline Buster pin. Okay, and this time we are going to send them out. And these are the stickers that they showed me last time. Remember the portraits of me.
Yes.
So I'm going to sign them, and
Yes.
we're gonna give out 3 sets of each. And the pin. And I want to see who are the lucky ones. Okay, so where should I sign them?
Whenever you want.
Whenever I want.
Yes.
Should I sign them here in the middle?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so there we go. Today is
Uh,
30,
the last day of
last
July.
day of July. Okay, so July 31st, 2020, with a heart.
Thank
I'll sign
you.
the other 2 copies after this show. Okay.
Okay, sure.
We'll make sure that you receive them as early as possible. I hope you like them.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I give these back to you.
Yes,
I give you
and
back the pen.
thank
All
you.
right. Be careful when you walk. And I'm gonna go out there and kick some. I won't use that word. Let's go.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Phones off. Phones off.
All right. I'm gonna leave you. So leave your comments on Weibo, and you will have this gift. So hopefully you will be the lucky one.
Welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. In this series, I dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us, as always, in real time by sending us your comments or questions via the CGTN page on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN application, email us at thepointwithalex@cgtn.com. Let me know what you're thinking. And as usual, we start our live streaming every Friday at 11 a.m. Beijing time. So get in touch, and I just might read out your comments. Speaking of comments, well, we received some since last week's show. Some comments on social media and regarding China-U.S. relations. The first one, well, not so positive, but we'll read it just as well. So Tintin lost in America. China rose cunningly, not peacefully. It fooled the world that it was becoming an open market like West countries, and some liberal leaders fell into the Chinese trap. China will not see the same good old days for sure. Watch, in next 10 years, China will become giant North Korea. Well, cunningly or not, that's an opinion, but no shots fired. That's a fact. There are a few people, I tell you, who have been making a living by predicting China's collapse, and they're still waiting. Tintin lost them in America. You want to join them? Another comment by Franklin Smith, 60, peacefully, by bullying its neighbors like Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Taiwan, etc., into forcing them to accept Chinese hegemony in international waters. Well, if China would have exercised hegemony, Asia would have a different name by now. That might be called China. So I don't think history proved you right. Finally, James Conway, IND, says since 1949, China has gone from feudalism to the space age and did so without waging frequent wars and robbing half of the world. China may not be perfect, but what other nations has lifted 800 million people out of poverty. China's record of achievement is admirable. So many thanks, but still a long way to go. Finally, by Brookman 65, U.S. needs a paradigm shift in thinking. U.S. is fundamentally unable to accept the fact that China has outcompeted them in 5G and other tech areas. U.S. would rather start a war than admit losing the tech race. U.S. under the Trump regime will lie, steal, and cheat, in Pompeo's words. Well, we have to make sure that those who lie, steal, and cheat, my words, does not shape history in any big way. Anyway, thanks for the feedback. I appreciated the criticism and the praise alike. Keep them coming. This week, we're going to unpack U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's recent speech on China and the barrage of criticism it has attracted in its wake. But instead of busting media, good morning, Mr. Pompeo. Instead of busting media reports on the subject, we want to give credit to some pieces that have pointed out the speech's most glaring problems and flawed logic, all against the backdrop of inflamed U.S.-China relations. The speech, entitled Communist China and the Free World's Future, was made on July the 23rd, just a day after the U.S. abruptly ordered the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas. Delivered from the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum in California, the speech made numerous references to the former U.S. president who, in 1972, traveled to China, ushering in a new chapter of relations between the two countries. Since the two countries established formal ties in 1979, relations have blossomed. Throughout the 1980s, for instance, normalized relations between the two, and China's economic reforms accelerated the exchange of goods, people, and ideas. U.S. companies were increasingly drawn to this huge market. Today, corporate America's operations in China raked in another $300 billion to $400 billion US dollars of revenue. Now, China's entry into the World Trade Organization in December 2001 was also a milestone in terms of shaping its economy, but also in Sino-American relations, as the U.S. was the prime mover in China's accession to the World Trade Organization. Now, in 1972, our annual bilateral trade was less than $100 million US dollars, and two-way investment in each other's markets was close to, guess much, zero. Now, today, the two countries are among each other's top trading partners. Statistics show that the U.S. trade in goods with China totaled over $700 billion US dollars in 2018. It also needs to be pointed out that China's effective system, governance, and the hard work of the Chinese people meant China could succeed once reintegrated into the world. Many other countries that have had this opportunity have not made the cut. Now, China and the U.S., of course, have their fair share of differences, different political systems, language, culture, and history. But despite these challenges, the two governments have emphasized their economic collaboration and mutual benefits, which has resulted in one of the most important, if not the most important, relationship of the 21st century. A relationship that concerns not only bilateral, but also global peace and prosperity. So a lot has changed between China and the United States over the past 50 years. Now, Nixon's legacy is palpable throughout Pompeo's speech. Before introducing Pompeo, the host even noted that on Nixon's grave there's an epitaph from his inaugural address that says the greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. But judging from the U.S. Secretary of State's speech, not to mention actions, Pompeo seems to have no interest in such an honor. Instead, he seems intent on dismantling whatever is left of the China-U.S. relationship that his predecessors worked so hard to build over the last 5 decades. Rather than partners, he cast the two countries as rivals in a quest to win over the hearts and minds of the rest of the planet. But let's listen to how he describes the relationship in his own words.
Securing our freedoms from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time, and America is perfectly positioned to lead it because our founding principles give us that opportunity.
So aside from tired cliches like this taken straight out of the U.S. warmongering handbook, his speech doesn't reflect a clear understanding of U.S. policy toward China. Luckily, there are foreign policy experts and students of history who can shed light on the big picture, keep the importance of this relationship in perspective, and put Pompeo in his place. And there are the media outlets that have given these analysis a platform. So this week, unlike what we used to do, I want to thank some international media for showcasing the other side of the story. First up, the Washington Post on July the 25th published the opinion piece, "What Mike Pompeo Doesn't Understand About China, Richard Nixon, and the U.S. Foreign Policy." Written by the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haas, the piece calls out Pompeo's misrepresentation of history and his failure to suggest a coherent or viable path forward for managing a relationship that more than any other will define this era. Let's listen to how Pompeo, for instance, describes the inspiration behind Nixon's China engagement.
With that historic trip to Beijing, President Nixon kicked off our engagement strategy. He nobly sought a freer and safer world, and he hoped that the Chinese Communist Party would return that commitment.
Well, Haas's piece starts with an outright rebuttal of Pompeo's characterization of Nixon's China engagement policy 50 years ago, that it was a geopolitical play to use China as a counterweight to the former Soviet Union and shape China's foreign policy, not its internal nature. To the opposite of what Pompeo claimed to be a total failure, the engagement efforts have largely succeeded. More importantly, the U.S. has gained immensely from the leverage that contributed to the Cold War ending when and how it did. Haas also pointed out that China has not fought a war with another country since its 1979 border conflict with Vietnam, and the Taiwan Strait has been peaceful, which contributed to the region's economic success. Haas's most resounding rebuttal of the speech is in response to Pompeo's China strategy, which he describes as bound to fail. It is not within our power to determine China's future, much less transform it, Haas said. That goes without saying, of course. China is a country of 1.4 billion people, 5,000 years of history, guys. Now, Haas also admitted that America needs to admit its own problems when it comes to accusing China's alleged human rights record. He argues America's voice would be much stronger if we practiced at home what we preached abroad. A very salient observation. President Trump and those who worked for him have forfeited much of their credibility as democracy advocates with their repeated descriptions of the U.S. media as an enemy of the people or as fake, their attacks on the independent judiciary, and their use of federal forces to repress dissidents in our cities. Now, this is a pretty powerful indictment of the Trump administration's own human rights records, don't you think? Incidentally, an opinion piece at The Atlantic on July the 25th, written by Thomas Wright at the Brookings Institution, echoes these exact same points. Entitled Pompeo's Surreal Speech on China, the article also more pointedly exposes the speech's inherent contradictions. For example, the piece says that in his speech, Pompeo says the U.S. will organize the free world while alienating and undermining the free world. He extols democracy while aiding and abetting its destruction at home. And he praises the Chinese people while generalizing about the ill intent of Chinese students who want to come to America. Every Chinese student might be a spy. Remember some people saying that? Especially, as the opinion piece says, Pompeo has some nerve to now claim that what is upside down is right side up. Wright goes on to proclaim that Pompeo is also ultra-loyal to a president who cares not one whit for democracy, dissidence, freedom, or transparency overseas. Pompeo's account, by contrast, is a Manichaean, politicized caricature, meaning thinking in black and white terms, overly simplistic and dichotomy views. Last, we'll look at Bloomberg's opinion piece by Robert Kaplan, titled "China Doesn't Want to Conquer, Just Do Business," especially with respect to Pompeo's warnings of a maritime empire. Kaplan says, Pompeo claims the purpose of China's armed forces is not to protect its homeland, but to expand a Chinese empire. Earlier, he used the phrase maritime empire. But Kaplan makes a good point when he says, whereas the U.S. has historically been a missionary power around the globe, proselytizing the ideals of democracy and human rights, China has no such impulses. That's right. China, both historically and now, has no expansion plan beyond its own territories and adjacent waters. As I said, otherwise Asia might not have been called Asia, but have been called China by now. It is important to note that all three of these pieces also criticize elements of China and its political system, and the pieces did not dismiss the idea that there are real issues China and the U.S. must address. But the overarching point is that the top U.S. diplomat could have made a far more diplomatic and useful speech at such a critical moment. One more opportunity has been wasted, or shall I say, far more damage has been done. Is he still a diplomat or an ideological crusader? One more opinion piece I want to mention, this one published in the New York Times, and it was written by a molecular biologist living in China by the name of Rao Yi about his family's experience, true experience with COVID-19. The title goes, "My relatives in Wuhan survived. My uncle in New York did not." Now, the author talks about his family's history, some who immigrated to the U.S. and some who stayed in China, a picture that has become more interesting as coronavirus struck. The author says, "Our family has 12 members in Wuhan, mostly on my mother's side, and 6 in New York, mostly on my father's side. All my relatives in Wuhan are safe. Uncle Eric died in New York after the pandemic moved to the United States, the world's strongest country militarily, the richest economically, and the most advanced medically." I commend the New York Times for giving space to such a thought-provoking piece. Of course, the paper has been attacked for publishing this story. Pompeo called Rao Yi's view antithetical to the American way of life, and that the New York Times was propagating Chinese propaganda. Rao Yi simply told the true story of what happened to his relatives. What is not, then? And my dear friends, what would you call this? Listen to this.
I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan.
Now, 92 days have passed since he said this on TV, and we've yet to see a single shred of evidence. Same question to President Trump, too. We're waiting for the truth from this administration. Anyway, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll talk to my guests about these opinion pieces, Pompeo's speech, and how important this moment really is for China-U.S. ties. It has to do with both you and me and everybody else. Stay with us.
On Friday morning, China said it had informed the U.S. side to close its consulate general in the southwestern city of Chengdu. The move is in response to Washington's abruptly shutting down the Chinese consulate general in Houston this week. Beijing had condemned the U.S. move, calling it a political provocation, which violates international law and a bilateral consular agreement.
The current China-U.S. situation is not something China wants to see. The responsibility lies entirely with the United States. We once again urge the U.S. to revoke its erroneous decision and create the conditions needed to bring bilateral relations back to normal. Some of the personnel in the U.S. consulate in Chengdu have engaged in activities that are incompatible with their status, interfering in China's internal affairs and damaging China's security interests. China has made representations on this, and the U.S. is well aware of it.
On Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo took fresh aim at China in a speech.
As President Trump has made very clear, we need a strategy that protects the American economy and indeed our way of life.
Pompeo gave his usual Chinese criticism. But what was new this time around is that he talked about Washington possibly creating an alliance for its purpose.
The United Nations, NATO, the G7 countries, the G20, our combined economic, diplomatic, and military power is surely enough to meet this challenge if we direct it clearly and with great courage. Maybe it's time for a new grouping of like-minded nations, a new alliance of democracies.
Pompeo also said U.S. allies must use more creative and assertive ways to press China to change its ways, although nobody has any clue about what kind of method they will pursue. The venue of Pompeo's speech in Southern California is very symbolic. He spoke at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library. Nixon set the United States on a path to restoring relations with China. In 1972, he made a historic trip to China, ending 25 years of mutual estrangement. Now Pompeo says Western engagement with China could not continue as it has. 陈小书 CGTN。
Welcome back to this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by me, Li Xin from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined on the line by Marilyn G. Wax from Atlanta, U.S. She is a former NPR business news editor and a visiting professor at Tsinghua University. I'm also pleased to be joined by Teng Jimeng, Professor Teng Jimeng, former Fulbright scholar and Boston College and New York University. So welcome the two of you to The Point. A very critical moment of time as we are speaking. The latest news that I can point out is that the economy, for instance, for the second quarter of the United States plummeted by 1/3, the worst in the past 40 years. And then President Trump also talked about the possibility of delaying the upcoming elections. So Professor G. Wax, how do you look at the latest development in the context of what we talked about just now?
Yes, that's why I personally think that Pompeo's speech was not particularly important. Right now, there's so many other things happening in the United States. The economy is, as you've noted, in terrible shape because of the pandemic that's put so many people out of work. So there's a great deal of attention right now on the economy, and we've had 150,000 people have died of COVID, millions have been infected, and it's a very difficult time, to say the least, in the United States. So we're getting a lot of these distracting messages from the White House. So obviously, this is a year when the election is to be held in November for the next presidential term. And all of the polling in the United States shows that President Trump is falling pretty far behind. So he needs to change the story. He doesn't really want people to focus on the job losses, the deaths, the spread of the disease. So he's looking for other topics, ways to distract us. And among the other things that he is doing is one thing that's sort of easy in a way for him to do is to attack China, because at a time when Americans are out of work, he wants to blame China for the loss of American jobs. And that's distraction, but I know that it's a true change in policy at this point.
He has been doing that pretty much for a long time, especially since he came into office, and yet we are seeing really a concerted effort to not only throw China under the bus, but, to run over it back and forth. We are talking about not just Mr. Pompeo giving a speech, we're talking about the head of the FBI, we're talking about the head of the Department of Justice, we're talking about the National Security Advisor. I mean, I don't know how much resources, how much time and energy is put in to come up with such a seemingly coherent set of speeches outlining a China policy at the end of President Trump's first term. It seems that, if they want to deflect from their domestic failure, it's a rather gigantic effort. Again, Professor G. Wax.
Yes, I mean, in terms of a larger strategy, remember that as recently as January and February, President Trump was praising Xi Jinping, talking about how they were making great progress on trade deals. So all of a sudden, after the COVID pandemic became much, much worse in the United States and truly destabilized the economy, that's when you really saw this big shift towards a much more aggressive stance on China. So I don't know, is this really a change in strategy, or is this just an election tactic? And it seems to me that at this time, this is more election tactics than geopolitical strategy that's really, which is not to say that it doesn't hurt diplomatically. It does in the short term. It certainly puts U.S. and Chinese relations on a rougher path. But what will everything be like in January? If we have a President Biden, it may be a completely different approach just a few months from now.
Okay, let me get our Chinese friends' perspective. Professor Teng, what is your take? First of all, what's the intention of having such a comprehensive outlining of some kind of a tougher policy towards China? And do you think this has already done some damage to the bilateral ties, or we don't need to worry so much, or waste our energy on something that is not going to be translated into policy anyway?
Well, I think that, in fact, this has been a policy that had been kind of incubating, perhaps, and conceding over the past, trying to build and develop over the past decades. One thing I'd like to remind our listeners and perhaps viewers is that this policy has been the product of many years in terms of the foreign policy staff working for the White House. If we review the history of the Cold War, for example, George Kennan's long telegraph sent out from Moscow laid the very foundation, perhaps, for this administration's foreign policy. One very important speech made before Secretary Pompeo's speech was by Dr. Kyron Skinner, the former policy planner of the State Department, in which that she actually elaborated on this very fighting, quote unquote, the fighting between China and the United States, which dated back to the Cold War years, ever since the end of the Second World War. Remember, she was talking about the fighting between two different civilizations, one representing the Caucasian civilization and also the East Asian Confucian civilization. And so Pompeo actually took over this very baton and elaborate on that very Cold War policy.
So basically, Professor Teng,
yes.
Professor Teng, you're saying that this ideological struggle or this ideological prejudice, let's say, has always existed. It's just that it finally drifted to the surface and has become something explicit. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's been out there for many years. And so apparently I agree with my fellow speaker. This is basically almost, in short-term wise, this is almost like an election tactic. But then once again, because apparently Pompeo wants to present Trump's successor with a fait accompli of a new Cold War. And so they're preparing for this. They have been doing this. They have been doing this for many years.
Yeah. All right. Professor G. Wax, let me go to you for a real quick reaction on this. Do you agree that this has been something in the making all the while? Or I'll come back to that in just a moment. Let's take a look at some comments that we have received so far. For instance, this one says, State Pompeo tells the truth about China. The CCP is a global menace and the foremost threat to America's health, prosperity, and national security. We must re-elect our president, the first U.S. leader, to truly confront this China challenge. Okay, I'll take this opportunity and ask, okay, this is a second comment by Mr. Richard Haas. I'll read that in just a moment. Let me go to Professor G. Wax for your immediate reaction first on the points mentioned so far.
We do have two very different types of systems, and you could call it a clash of civilizations or whatever. We do have differences, but we have so many commonalities that trying to treat each other as at war, at some kind of a Cold War, it's really fundamentally ridiculous. I mean, American farmers need to sell their products to the Chinese market. The United States buys electronics from China, clothing, auto parts. I mean, the list is endless. We are very closely tied together. There's no way to separate the US economy from the Chinese economy at this point. We need each other. We also have many areas where we need to cooperate. We have to work together on climate change, on nuclear proliferation, on just cleaning up pollution. We have to take care of the oceans. Yeah. We're both Pacific countries. Yeah. We have to work along with other countries that are also Pacific Rim countries. So the idea that we're going to have the same kind of clash that we once had with the old Soviet Union, the United States and the Soviet Union, when I was a kid growing up, we had nothing in common. I never saw a Russian product in my life. I mean, what did you buy from Russia? Nothing. But the relationship between the United States and China, every time I pick up my iPhone, I'm picking up a little piece of Chinese labor. Right. We are so wedded together that taking an approach that is so confrontational, both, and allow me to say, on China's side as well, Xi Jinping has been confrontational in ways that are not appropriate. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman blamed the U.S. Army for the COVID back in March. I mean, those things are ridiculous. The truth is that the United States and China have to rise together for the sake of the planet we all live on. Right. So this confrontation.
Yeah, I agree. This job of assigning blame is never going to end, and that's going to continue to sour the relationship. At this moment, I think Chinese ambassador to the United States, Mr. Cui Tiankai, put out a very good piece on Politico.com where he talked about that China and the United States must reset our relationship, and we must all choose to be on the right side of history. The thing is, Professor Teng, let me ask you. Can we all be on the right side of history? Because to some people who are so ideologically obsessed, it seems that only one of these two countries can be on the one side of history. Clearly, there's a difference, right, Professor Teng?
Well, absolutely. I mean, no one can claim, no one is entitled to claim that he or she can be on the right side of history. I think if you look back to history, we all know that each and every civilization has great merits, and these great merits and advantages should be the very foundation for better relations among different nations. I agree fully with Professor G-Beck has just said. I mean, there's no such thing as a civilizational clash. I mean, we two countries used to be allies in wars. I mean, in the Second World Wars against evil actors. And currently our two countries are working closely in fighting. Over the past 4 decades in fighting against AIDS, poverty, diseases, climate change.
Right.
We have so much in common. And in this case, I think that nobody can be, in a sense, that very arrogant. I mean, nobody in our two countries should be that very arrogant in misleading our two nations and the people in our nations.
We have to leave it there. Unfortunately, time is really short, but I really appreciated our guests and your great insight. These are such important ideas that need to be heard, and at such a very critical period of time. I do hope that people understand the importance of this relationship, and I do hope that by the way, I had Marilyn G. Wax joining us from Atlanta, who's visiting professor at Tsinghua University, and Professor Teng Jimeng, who's joining us from Beijing Foreign Studies University. I wanted to say that stop trying to change someone else. Try to change your wife, try to change your girlfriend or boyfriend and see whether that works. And now try to change 1.4 billion people, and you're bound to fail. So if you can't do that, what are you going to do? Try to live with them peacefully, right? Anyway, that's my question for you for this week. I hope you go away and think about it. Anyway, thank you very much for having followed me on this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. I'll continue my interaction with the netizens after this, after the wrapping up of this discussion. So if you're joining us on live streaming, do stay on. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Give it to Shen.
Yes, comments. Fresh comments.
Hello, thank you for coming. But actually, hello to you. But actually, our show is just over. Yeah, thank you for coming. But I think next time you can join our show. Next time, okay?
Oh, let me have a word
Okay,
with
please.
Jaime.
Okay.
Jaime, do you see me? You can see you.
Please wait a moment.
Yeah.
Please
Okay.
We can just try
Yeah.
to.
This is wonderful.
Okay, right now we can see
this is wonderful. Yeah. Well.
Okay.
What happened, Jaime? So Mr. Flo Cruz. Yeah, Mr. Flo Cruz was supposed to be on our show. He couldn't make it, but he's just online now. That's why, and I haven't seen him for a while. So
I can give him a shot.
Please.
Hi.
Jaime is the former bureau chief of CNN in Beijing. So the live streaming continues. Yeah. Well, it's been a great discussion. Thank you guys, and Professor G. Ranks. It's great to have you. Yeah, I really appreciated your comments. We really do. Hopefully. Yeah, come to the studio. We miss people in the studio. Hi, May, you too. Oh, of course. He's always a frequent to the show. All right, guys. Yeah, talk to you later. Thanks. Bye. Yeah. So.
What did he say? We couldn't hear.
Oh, Jaime. Oh, well, they were all kind of stuck where they are, in America or somewhere else, because the flights are not open, or they're just way too expensive. I mean, a plane ticket for economy can be the price of a business class, so it's unbelievable. So they're all kind of stuck somewhere, and we're all stuck in the studio without guests. You see the difficulty to try to bring people online. Sometimes the quality not very good, and yeah, it's just not the same as face to face. So
Yes.
So did our people enjoy the show this time?
Yeah, I think we got a lot of comments.
We got a lot of comments.
Yeah.
800 people watching us now. Wow. And it's a good show, Liu Xin. Good discussion. CCT, I remember he's always here. Thank you very much too. Okay. So American propaganda is no longer effective due to Liu Xi. Sorry, I didn't. China is leading the world, Candace? Well, not yet. In some areas we are. In goodwill, I would say. Liu Xin is lovely. Thank you very much. CCP are good. In general, I would say they're trying to do a good job to lead the people into prosperity, into peace. You know, there are corrupt members, of course, like everywhere. But in general, that's why I'm here. Liu Xin, I love you. You're beautiful and smart. Thank you so much. Okay, it goes up very fast. This lady has good propaganda. Well, I'm good. If you hate me. No, I'm just trying to do a good job, okay? Not everything is perfect. Thanks, Liu Xin tells the truth. Thank you. So, watching from Australia, thank you, Dao Li. Yeah, Liu Xin, stop lies. You know, it's very easy for someone to tell a lie, but it's very difficult to bust a lie, right? That's the difficulty of this world full of misinformation, full of disinformation. Someone can just say something and then it will go viral. And then when this person corrects himself or herself, nobody retweeted it. And for us, we have to take pain to give you the correct information. That's not fair, right? That's not fair.
No.
Save us the trouble. I want to do more yoga. World needs China.
Keep healthy.
So a lot of comment from me today, a lot of good comment. Of course, there are people who are critical as well, but I'm encouraged, and I thank you. 750 people watching us. I thank you as every week for having followed us. I'll see you next week. Next week, I'll bring you something special from China. I promise.
Okay.
Have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.